In this video, I am going to start disassembling my 2018 Ford Mustang rear end. What I'm trying to do is swap the diff that comes in the new Mustangs called the Super 8.8 diff. I'm going to try and swap that and build a kit for it to bolt in to an S13 or 240SX subframe. Mainly, I want to do this swap because these diffs are very cheap. They're easily findable on eBay and Craigslist and those types of things. The other reason is they come limited slip from the factory, whether it's an automatic Mustang or a manual Mustang, they're all limited slip. With my Z, I know the weakest point in this car is the rear end / the axles and some of the suspension components that came factory on this car. I know that's going to kind of be the weakest point. So with my S13 build, I'm actually going to start on the rear end. The rear end was like the last thing I upgraded on this. So I actually want to kind of do it reverse. I want to be the first thing I upgrade on the S13 is the rear end. I want to make sure that the rear end, the axles, the wheel bearings, all of that can handle high horsepower for whatever motor I decide to put in it. One hurdle is going to be getting shorter axles because the track width on a Mustang is actually 8 inches wider than an S13. Sourcing axles, getting them measured right, and getting some strong ones, but that'll be part of the process. I don't know if I'll even be able to complete this swap, but I'm going to try. It's going to be my winter project. I want everything drivetrain wise to be usable off this rear end. So that's wheel bearings, so then you can use a factory Ford Mustang rotor. I want to be able to use Mustang brakes, so hopefully I'll design a bracket, and then custom axles, and then yeah, I think that's it. So time to start working on this rear end and get the diff out. Well, got the diff and the axles out. Also, that's disassembled to get the wheel bearings off, just to look at them and start sizing them up. And I've actually already started mocking up the diff in the subframe, and it actually fits really well. I think this is going to be a lot easier than I thought. I'm just kidding. It actually does not fit. It's going to be harder than I thought. First of all, I had to take off the sway bar in order to start this process. And then it doesn't go up any higher than this. You can see these ears here are hitting this part there, and it can't scoop back anymore because these ears are hitting on the back of the subframe. And this red line right here is the center line for where the axles need to be. So you can see that it needs to scoop back maybe 1.5 inches to even be, in line with where I need them to be. So I got this laser level lined up in the center there. Just eyeballing it for now, but it's giving me an idea of kind of what next steps I need to do. I really do not want to make this a complex conversion or conversion kit. I wanted it to be bolt-in. If I could just make a bracket to bolt in, but the diff is just too big. There's nothing I can make adapter bracket wise to just fit even. And we're also really close on the diff cover because these ears are almost in line with the diff cover. So yeah, it's just not looking good as far as ease of swap, but that's okay. I'm kind of stubborn in the fact that I want it to work, and I like challenges. I will get it to work. Hopefully I can figure out a decent way to go, but I think for now, what I'm going to do is get this section of the subframe taken apart, these disconnected, and then I can scoot the diff back and up and go from there. These ears, once they get scooted back, they should clear. And I'm just hoping that, you know, they land in a decent spot where I can build a bracket to bolt from here to under this where the OEM diff bolted. So I'll build something really strong to maybe tie in those together and then bolt up here. But that's just all hypothetical, what I'm thinking about so far, but I really just got to do some work and get this piece cut. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Well, I wouldn't say it was easy to take that out, but it certainly wasn't hard. Got it done in an evening, took about an hour and a half. I was taking my time to make sure my cuts were really precise, and if I needed to put it back together, I could pretty easily. I started with taking off this brace back here. It was like this. Started by taking that off, but then as I went along, I found out that you didn't have to take that off. It was just a couple places the whole thing was welded onto the subframe. So on the other side, I was able to keep it all in one piece. So learn as you go. Now I can do some more test fitting with the diff. Well, even though it looks like I just rolled the diff up in there and let it sit there, I've actually spent an hour or so getting it as level and as straight as I could within the subframe. I've got the laser level pointed through the center of the wheel bearing. So then I've had it centered up on the diff, kind of the best I can so far. You can see this red line is in the center of this casting here, and then it disappears, but just because it's hitting somewhere over here. But you can't necessarily rely on that because that part of the suspension can go up and down. So I've also taken some measurements off of that diff and where the center of the axle slides into the diff, how far down that is, because the diff obviously won't be moving, and that matches. It's also centered up within this hump, so it might look a little offset, but that's just to keep the axle straight as possible, because that's where that one comes out. It is right in the center of this hump, so that's what I'm doing with this one. And the only thing I need to do yet is take some more measurements to get the pinion angle correct, because you can see that this one isn't resting on this hump here, whereas the S13 subframe is. And all I've done so far is get this subframe leveled up pretty good. And I need to, and all I did with this one was I get this leveled up basically to match the subframe. But that doesn't mean that this angle is the same. I need to take some measurements to see if maybe it's angled down a couple degrees or up, so I can match the same, pinion angle, because that's very important when building a drivetrain. And that's what I'm going to do next. And maybe we'll start building some cardboard templates to get this thing mounted up in there. So I actually took the measurements of the pinion angle for this subframe and diff, and it actually looks to be level to all of the mounting points. So that was like 0.2, this one's 0.4, this one is off, I think, because that rubber bushing is shot, but if I set it right here, 0.1, 0.2, you can see that bushing is shot, so I'm not trusting that one. I'll take some other measurements, but overall, it looks like the diff angle is the same as all of the subframe mounting points. So that's actually pretty good news, because the way I have it now is really close. So it looks like that gap there is going to stay. So I guess this is kind of the genesis of the parts that I've worked on. Started off as this really flimsy piece that I kind of took from paper and put it up there. Then went into actual kind of thickness and design. Then moved over to mirroring it to the other side, and I had two of these pieces. Made sure that these were right to fit the toe arms, and then figured out where I wanted the roll cage bar to be. So I mounted that circle, took those measurements, and transferred them onto these two pieces here and 3D printed those. And then that's how we got to the final metal piece. So in the process of designing this piece, I was taking all of my measurements off of this driver's side rear toe arm, I've learned that it's called, and mocking up this bracket. So I was building this ear here and all of its angles and leanings, and this is what it was supposed to look like. This goes out to the knuckle, this gets bolted up through here, there's a bolt hole, and then this piece gets mirrored to the other side, and then I can have a bolt hole to mount this in. But while I was doing this, and then I ended up started taking measurements on the passenger side, all of my measurements were just totally off. This was not gonna fit. Like all of my distances between here, they were just off. This angle, that angle was totally wrong for the passenger side. I just could not figure out why. But I have finally figured out why, and it wasted a bunch of time for me, which sucks, but this is the problem. It's totally bent. That piece has a huge bend in it, which kicks it out that way, and then this piece has been shifted like this, as you can tell. This one here is from the other subframe that I have, luckily, and it's straight. And that one's bent, which is causing my measurements to be off from side to side. So I don't know if there's a lesson there. Without having a lot of experience with S13 chassis components, I did not know that that was bent when I looked at it. So I really don't know what I could have done other than, I guess, double check parts before I started taking measurements on. That probably is what I should have done. But now we've swapped this one in. I've taken all the measurements and I've corrected this piece. Well, I'm just about ready to tack weld most of this bracketry in place. All of the supports for the bushings to the roll cage bar or the tube, all of that, and then I'll tack weld the tube to the plates that get welded to the subframe. You can see one of my measurements was off here. There's a bit of a gap between this support bracket here and the roll cage. So I've got, I think this is about 1/8 inch flat bar that takes up that gap. So in the meantime, I'll just cut a couple strips of this and add it to the base. And then next time I plasma cut these out, I'll add an 1/8 inch to the bottom, and then that should cover that. But I don't want to waste any more time or spend more time just to cut new ones out of this, because still more changes and modifications might be necessary. So this is just a temporary solution to get everything situated for the jig purposes. I've also spent so much time making sure that the subframe is level left to right and front to back, and then also that the diff is level left to right and front to back too. And this digital angle gauge reads in tenths. So when I say level, it is 0.0. So it is very, very accurate front to back, and that's taken a lot of time. So I've upgraded my setup here. I got rid of the jack that the diff was sitting on because that caused a lot of problems. It just wasn't very solid. Could you be quiet over there? And they're all on jack stands, and the diff is totally level from side to side, front to back. And now I have the subframe all on basically scissor jacks on all of the main points, so I can really maneuver that piece into place. So I had the subframe off over here sitting on the floor so that I could grind all of the rust and paint off of the places where I think I'm going to be working and or welding. And so I moved that back over onto the diff that was totally level. I spent like 15 to 30 minutes getting the diff and subframe aligned the way I needed it to be. And I put my metal jig back in place and it fits. The bolts lined back up to the back of the diff. So that's great news and relief for me that I took it all apart, put it back together, aligned it using a bunch of different methods, and it still came out fitting. So this back part is done. I've got it tack welded to the subframe. So now I can pretty much run these bolts down and we can start working on getting the front mounted, and that's going to be the part 2 video. So I hope you guys enjoy, and yeah, find it interesting to come along with me and figure this out and get this in there. So thanks for watching. See you later.